Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham Knight, Knightmare difficulty, no damage walkthrough, and there is no coverage of the main story this time around for this part of the walkthrough, because I did a lot of the side activities to the point where they were almost an hour long when combined into a single video. So adding in elements of the main story would not be possible without making it more than an hour long, and so then I would have to do this commentary in about 2 sittings, just so I could actually create a lengthier video. And just to not put up with that, I'm instead going to relegate a huge portion of this video to Riddler, because Riddler is the one where I did most of the side missions for, and I at least beat him in this one compared to a lot of the other side missions. I mean, I did beat Laszlo Valentine here. I did some checkpoints, I did some watchtowers, I did do a bit of Penguin side mission, but Riddler's the one that I feel has the most significance to him for this particular video, because I did more of his content to the point of actually beating him. And we're going to be finishing up his races, we're going to be finishing up the Batmobile puzzles, and we'll be finishing up the combat scenarios involved with his Riddler bots. And I will say, guys, the combat encounters with the Riddler bots were very painful because of the amount of times Batman would prioritize the wrong guy or Kaplan would prioritize the wrong guy, and I would end up taking damage. It was a matter most vexing at the time, and I did not think it was going to express itself to this severe degree. Like, you will not believe the amount of times Batman or Kaplan would prioritize the wrong guy, or I'd end up doing the wrong action, just because the game doesn't know how to handle combat scenarios with enemies that you're not meant to be engaging with. And it's all entirely dependent upon this whole system of swapping between your AI partner and the like. And in all honesty, guys, I don't like any of the combat encounters with a lot of the AI companions, mainly because they get in the way. Like, these combat scenarios where you're with Nightwing, or when you're with Robin, they're fine a bit, but at the same time, the AI on this game, they'll be attacking a lot of enemies, and they'll floor enemies to the ground, they'll mess with your ability to keep your combo going. If they end up prioritizing someone at the same time, you're prioritizing them. And I just don't like any of the side characters in the main stories of the Arkham games, or even in their side activities. And like I said before, the only side character I really like is Azrael, because he's a copy-paste of Batman. And every other side character has either the slowest animations possible, inferior gadgets, or they just simply don't have the capabilities to deal with some of the possible enemy arrangements that you'll be dealing with in their combat scenarios. And that's why Batman is so much better than them, and that's why they are inferior to Batman. And that is why you never really see me playing as them, because they come with vulnerabilities that just make the combat a lot more cumbersome to deal with. And I feel like the combat scenarios where you're with Catwoman are the combat system at its most cumbersome nature, because Catwoman is so limited in her capabilities for dealing with the Riddler bots. Her gadgets are completely useless, she has a lot of slow animations, and like I said before, because they're putting you into combat scenarios where it's so easy for the misprioritization of this kind of combat system to take place, where your characters prioritize the wrong person, because it's happening so frequently in these Riddler bot encounters because of the way they design these enemies, it's just very obnoxious and a matter most vexing when they're putting in these kind of scenarios alongside a side character who is the worst side character I've ever played as in the entire Arkham series. And I'm not softening the blow right there at all. I'm gonna admit it, guys. Catwoman is the worst side character I have ever played as in the entire Arkham series. And they haven't made any improvements to her whatsoever. She doesn't have any of the new abilities included with Arkham Knight, like being able to pick up enemies off the ground and doing critical beatdowns and the like. She just has the exact same moveset from Batman Arkham City and nothing else. It's easily like the laziest form of side character content I have ever seen for an Arkham game. And to make matters worse, her DLC is the worst DLC in the entire Arkham series. But I'll save my thoughts on that DLC for when I actually get to it, because there are definitely a lot of DLCs I need to be doing after I do this full walkthrough of Batman Arkham Knight. And at least I'll enjoy the other DLCs a little bit more. But Catwoman, I will despise to no end, because it is objectively a poorly designed DLC, completely rushed out the door. QA did absolutely nothing when actually troubleshooting a lot of the errors present with Catwoman's Revenge. and it's just a throwaway piece of content that just reuses assets from Batman Arkham City, even gameplay formats as well. They reuse a format that they had in the third episode of Catwoman's DLC for Batman Arkham City, where you're just going to get 3 key cards and then you're knocking out enemies. Only it takes longer to do in Catwoman's Revenge because of the number of enemies that you're dealing with. And ironically, that's really the only part of the DLC I like. I like the whole idea of the enemies being randomized, so you're forced to use clever positioning and also using your loud takedown strategically in order to deal with the enemies, and it makes for a very tense encounter. And the fact that she doesn't have a lot of gadgets adds more to the intensity of that particular Predator encounter, and it can be suspenseful at times when you're put into a very unfavorable situation. But there's something about the emotions you feel during that Predator encounter that feel interesting. But then we get to the Riddler bot encounter in Catwoman's Revenge, and the game literally takes a shit and then it eats it up. That's what it is. Because you'd have to be so dense to not see the pure folly in trying to implement anti-free flow environments, anti-free flow enemies for a character that is designed with the free flow combat in mind, only with very limited capabilities. And then when you have the electrified floor and you're at the mercy of whatever animation Catwoman chooses to do, like, the only thing that DLC serves to do is make all of the issues apparent with the Batman Arkham series well known in a couple of minutes of content. That is very insulting for a DLC, and it further complements the whole idea that Rocksteady wanted to be done with Batman Arkham Knight, and that mentality bled into the actual structure of the story and the gameplay, and also with the DLCs, and that is why Catwoman's Revenge is the single worst DLC I have ever played in the entire Arkham series. And I don't even know if it's worth doing a no-damage walkthrough of Catwoman's Revenge, because no damage is down to pure luck and bullshit with that DLC. And I feel like my blooper section will be longer than the actual completed run of no damage for Catwoman's Revenge, because there is a lot of footage that I feel is worth saving with the number of problems you encounter with Catwoman's Revenge that I feel I need to show, because people are so oblivious to these kind of issues, and then they attribute these issues to, oh, just get good and you'll be fine. When it has nothing to do with your capabilities as a player, it has more to do with the game fucking you, because the Rocksteady didn't even comprehend their own designs at that point, almost on the same degree as with new Capcom not comprehending their own designs with Resident Evil Village. And I've already gone the extra mile to point out so many objective flaws with Resident Evil Village's gameplay designs, and why the developers are so brain dead as to think that game is possible to do close combat weapons only, or with other designs that have nothing to do with that restriction. I mean, there's so many problems with Resident Evil Village, but yet there is still something that just keeps me tethered to that game. But at least I've been putting a lot of effort into that. You go to Catwoman's Revenge on this game, and you don't have to put any effort to really showcase a lot of the problems with Catwoman's Revenge, because they all just make themselves known in that one encounter with the Riddler bots. And that's all I'm going to say for the moment, guys, because a lot of my thoughts I need to reserve for that DLC. But right now we're doing Professor Pig's boss fight, so after so long knowing the location of Professor Pig's hideout, now that I've unlocked Founders Island, I can finally go and do Professor Pig and stop more people from being tortured. Although I'm honestly surprised more victims weren't being tortured with how long it was taking me to unlock Founders Island. That's the kind of ludonarrative dissonance that is apparent with this boss fight with Laszlo Valentin. But these enemy types, the Dolotrons, Batman says they're immune to pain, and so you have to finish them off using takedowns, or using beatdowns, or using ground finishes. And fun fact, these Dolotrons are resistant to the multi-ground takedown, so you can't use that ability to floor multiple of these enemies to the ground and then finish them off, because Batman says they're immune to pain. So you're gonna have to isolate them one-on-one, and then just take them out accordingly. And we're also doing some of the firefighter encounters, which you haven't seen for quite a long time, but it's taken me a while to even stumble upon this kind of quest. And I've been so focused with the main story and the other side activities that I haven't even taken the time to find more of these firefighters. And I still don't understand why they need to have this many enemies guarding one single fireman. It's not like they're any different to the standard police officers and the like, or any other member of law enforcement. Why did they require such heavy guard, as if they're working with the superheroes, or they're working with other supervillains and the like? That really doesn't make any sense to me at all. But we're also doing some of the bomb defusal stuff right here, which, not much to really say here, because there's no strategy I can give you for these sequences. There's no clever placement of the Batmobile to deal with these sequences. I mean, the only time a drone encounter will ever present with any kind of consistent strategy is the GCPD showdown, where all those drones are attacking the GCPD, because you can put yourself in an alleyway to stop the enemies from ganging up on you, and then just take pot shots when necessary, which really balances out the encounter. And that's the only instance of drone engagement where they're not spawning out of thin air or spawning behind you or anything. They're focused entirely on the front of the GCPD. So without having to account for that annoying variable of enemies spawning out of thin air, the encounter is very balanced, and putting yourself in that position where you can stop the enemies from ganging up on you is so powerful. And it really captures the epicness of that scene, because that's the whole point. It's meant to be Batman and Oracle dominating the drones, and you're practically doing that, which is awesome. So it's good that Rocksteady had some thought when designing that encounter with the drones and the GCPD. And sadly, the same cannot be said with the rest of these drone encounters. Albeit, these bomb defusal ones are pretty fun, and it can be very hectic when a lot of drones are swarming you and you're just doing all these crazy maneuvers and the like just to dodge them. It can be very exciting, but when you're trying to do no damage, they can be very frustrating as well. But not really because of poor design, just because you get unlucky, because you don't stand a chance against that many drones. Unless you use the EMP or the missile launcher to give yourself a breather to actually understand where you are and move to a better position. But we now have a Predator encounter with the firefighter over here. So I spawned on the roof because I restarted the checkpoint, given that I got spotted and took damage. But this is a pretty simple Predator encounter. Nothing too egregious, nothing too tedious. It's only those 3 enemies up top that you need to use the Fear Takedown on. The rest of these enemies can be isolated easily. And speaking of enemies, I have been replaying Batman Arkham Origins, and I've just gotten up to the point where you infiltrate the GCPD to access the National Criminal Database. And I was doing the Predator encounter in that area, and I discovered something interesting. So, I don't think this was a thing in Batman Arkham City, but the armored guys, I don't think you could do knockdown smashes against the armored guys in Batman Arkham City, which would be logical. I mean, they're a heavy enemy, so you therefore have to do a loud takedown to compromise your position, but at the same time knock them out. And furthermore, even when the armored enemies were frozen by your freeze grenade in Batman Arkham City, you still couldn't take him out with the Ice Smash takedown because it prioritized a knockdown smash animation, and so therefore you couldn't take out those enemies using a loud takedown, which was really stupid. But it seems in Batman Arkham Origins this is not a thing. In Batman Arkham Origins, when you're using the knockdown smash against the armored guys, it instantly takes them out, which is good design, because you deal with a lot of armored guys in the Predator encounters for Batman Arkham Origins on New Game Plus. And it's I like the trade-off there. Like, you sacrifice your ability to stay silent by doing a knockdown smash against the armored guys. That right there feels like a better sense of balance, and you therefore have to be a lot more strategic with what you're doing. And like the armored guys themselves, they have some capabilities that don't make them very easy to dispatch. I mean, for one thing, you don't have access to the remote electric charge in Batman Arkham Origins, so instead you have to resort to other gadgets, and really the glue grenade is the most preferable gadget for dealing with armored guys, given that you can take them out with a knockdown smash. And also, they can resist the remote claw, so the heavy real ammo that you can get as an upgrade for the remote claw, the armored guys can resist the ability for you to string them up on gargoyles or on vantage points, which is a pretty interesting form of balance, and I think it definitely makes the remote claw not so overpowered as everyone says. And you can still use the remote claw to pull one armored guy into another armored enemy. Like, you can still use it that way when you're not using it for vantage point reasons, or when you're not using the heavy real ammo. But I'm guessing one of the main reasons why they let you take down armored guys with a knockdown smash is likely because you don't have a special gadget tailored to armored guys specifically, like with the remote electric charge from Batman Arkham City. When you use the remote electric charge against the armored guys in Batman Arkham City, they get floored to the ground because, of course, the metal on their armor is conducting the electricity, which makes them prone to being knocked down, which makes so much sense, and that's why they're vulnerable to a ground takedown. But in Batman Arkham Origins, given that you don't really have the best gadgets for dealing with a lot of the enemy types, that's why you get these moments where you can do knockdown smashes against the armored guys. Or, for instance, you have in combat the ability to stack two special combo multipliers together. Like the ability to actually do the takedowns. You can do two takedowns if you have 2 stars underneath your combo meter in Batman Arkham Origins, and it's there as sort of a substitute for the fact that you don't have the remote electric charge for Batman Arkham Origins. And also, one thing I have noticed as well about the armored guys, especially in Batman Arkham Origins, that is really bad, is in Batman Arkham City, when you were using your combo batarangs in the combat, if you hit an armored guy on accident, it would not kill your combo. But for some reason, in Batman Arkham Origins, if you use your combo batarang in combat and it accidentally hits an armored guy, it kills your combo because the game thought that you hit an armored guy, so therefore you should lose your combo, like what would happen if you were to use the normal strike. But I have no control over where my combo batarang is going, despite my limited analog capabilities. But why would it do that? How could they miss something as simple as that? That right there is one of the dumbest design choices ever with the armored guys. And the lack of any good gadgets to deal with them in combat. Like, the concussion detonator is the most useless gadget ever in all of Batman Arkham Origins. It practically does the same thing as the explosive gel in Batman Arkham Knight in the combat, where it stuns enemies. But the stun is only good if the enemies weren't swinging around so much, and if they were actually susceptible to takedowns. But you can't do any kind of special animation on enemies when they're actually blinded by the explosive gel or the concussion detonator. Like, they're disoriented by those weapons, and you can't do anything to capitalize on that, which is really stupid. So it's the most useless gadget ever, and it has no purpose in the Predator encounters at all, aside from scaring enemies, but you were already doing that in the Predator encounters of Batman Arkham City with the remote electric charge, so what is the whole point of that? And really, the only gadgets that are actually useful against armored guys in the combat of Batman Arkham Origins are the explosive gel and the Batclaw. Every other gadget is completely useless, because if you try to use any other gadget, they just kill your combo. It's really dumb that Warner Brothers decided to make that kind of stupid change, or just remove a feature that Arkham City had, which was good. But at the same time, they introduced improvements to the armored guys in the Predator encounters, so it's a trade-off, I understand that, but with the things they sacrificed, they can't be forgiven whatsoever. But yeah, I just thought I'd note that about the armored guys in Batman Arkham City versus Batman Arkham Origins, and how different the changes were between Warner Brothers directing Batman Arkham Origins and Rocksteady directing Batman Arkham City. But I mentioned many times that Batman Arkham Origins is my favorite of the Arkham games for good reason. It has fun side content. It has a really fun story to go through. The environments are pretty intriguing. I like the boss fights. And, I like some of the interactions you get between Batman and his rogues gallery. And then with Batman's personality overall. And then some of the exchanges he gets with Alfred as well. And the fact that Alfred plays a more prominent role in Batman Arkham Origins compared to the other Arkham games is another reason why I like that game. But there is no denying that one of my main problems with Batman Arkham Origins is the performance. That game has technical issues like crazy. The frame rate on that game is horrible. It can drop down to the 10s. It doesn't maintain a consistent 30 FPS most of the time. And I swear to God, guys, in one of my playthroughs of Batman Arkham Origins, the game was literally unplayable because it reached a low point with its frame rate where the game was running at what felt like 5 frames per second. And I tried my best to just persevere and just push through this, but I had to literally quit the entire game and then get back in it. Restarting the checkpoint didn't work, fast traveling didn't work. I had to quit the entire game and re-engage it in order to fix this frame rate issue, which I know for certain is going to happen again on some kind of rare occasion. But Batman Arkham Origins is a rush game in terms of performance. It has the worst performance ever in the entire Arkham series, and it's just inexcusable that Warner Brothers could fail so miserably at actually maintaining a consistent 30 FPS for Batman Arkham Origins. And I don't see how, though, because a lot of the other things that they delivered with the story and with the characters and some gameplay elements as well, like, they feel pretty good. So how could they mess up so much on the optimization and frame rate? That doesn't make any sense to me. Frame rate should always be the first thing you make sure is suitable for the game. But when you're getting moments where the game can't even run at a consistent 30 FPS, let alone like a consistent 25 FPS, that just goes to show your game has an underlying issue. And it was clear that the higher ups had to rush that game out the door so that their stockholders could actually pay them money, and that they actually invested well in whatever stock they had on Warner Brothers. Because believe it or not, guys, the consumer matters very little to the people who are actually betting on the stock market for this company. That's just the nature of gaming development, where that business model where the consumers don't matter at all and you have to rush the game out the door to appeal to your stockholders. That is what you're getting with the business model, and that's why a lot of games just end up being shit. Because they sacrifice gameplay, they sacrifice performance just so the developers can meet their window for actually releasing a game. And people wonder why lots of games just release in a very rushed state. And it's because that's not the first priority that developers go for. It seems like with a lot of developers, they try to release broken products because releasing a broken product does not present with as many financial consequences as delaying a game and actually putting more effort into it. Because delaying a game and actually putting additional development time to making sure it's working as intended costs more money than releasing a broken product. And this can apply to other professions as well. It's not just with gaming, that's just the financial model in general. And that's precisely why the consumers don't matter, because no matter how much consumers demand for actual improvement in a game, it doesn't supersede the authority given by the stockholders when they hold more sway over game development than the actual consumers and QA department. But that's no excuse at all. I don't like to consider that an excuse, and I just really wish we did something to change the way the financial backing of games works so that we always get a serviceable product and that we don't get a broken product, and it actually feels like the developers devoted enough time equally to gameplay, to story, to characters and writing and all this kind of stuff equally. But such a model is a dream that can't exist properly in this real world that we live in, with scummy bastards, greedy assholes, and money just making the world go around. And we value all of the wrong things because of the fact that we care more about money than anything else. Hell, that's why I'm sure there's a lot of divorces. Oh, did you see that just then? That right there is bullshit. Like, I went to go do a takedown, but Batman, for whatever reason, did not do the takedown animation. This happened a couple of times during the recording of this particular video, where Batman, for whatever reason, just stood still and did nothing, and you saw the golden multiplier go down to gray, indicating that I was doing a takedown animation, and Batman didn't do the animation. It must be a bug associated with the Riddler bots or something, because what else could it be? Because I've never had this problem with human enemies. It just seems to happen mainly with the Riddler bots. And I'm guessing the Riddler bots in general just have all these weird problems with them, given how oddly programmed they are. Oh, and by the way, right here, before you ascend after doing the second switch, you'll want to turn this over to the left to make sure that you have a clear path when you go to use the third grappling point. But as I was saying, money just makes the world go around in this day and age. And, that's why, a lot of the times our education system is very flawed. That's why, they never really teach us anything that matters when actually making a living. That's why criminals just have a better living standard than the people actually trying to live in society the way society set it up. Because trying to be a good person in this so-called functional society presents with more consequences, not just on a financial level, but on a personal level, on a moral level, and we value all the wrong things, and that's why we just cannot function very well as a society. And, I've already been well aware of this, but recent developments in my life have informed me to this notion that I'm describing right now, and I'm fully committed to it. That's just how I feel about my schooling and my job at this point. I just feel like a lot of the things I did in school are completely pointless now because they don't serve any crucial purpose for actually doing a job. The only reason school exists is just to get a document that declares that, oh, I can comprehend the material. But I guarantee you guys, if you were to do a job like I'm doing right now, a job that says, oh, you need to have a certain educational background to do this, and you were to assign someone who hasn't been to school at all, they could easily do what I'm doing right now in my job. Because when you go to the job, they teach you exactly what you need to know, and it has nothing to do with your schooling. So really, at that point, the schooling just feels like a complete ripoff. It's just a way for the government to steal your money and just force you to do all these things that just aren't actually necessary for actual progress into your life. And my dad mentioned that the only reason you'd ever want to continue schooling is just to continue your education. That's really it. And if you continue your education, yes, you'll get like a higher position. But I mean, just to learn the material necessary for a job, you don't have to go to school for that. In my case, I feel like I've learned a lot of knowledge, like actual crucial scientific knowledge, not just through school, but through other avenues as well. But the thing is that even if the subject matter is the same between school and non-school interactions, where's the whole value in going to school at that point when school is just a tedious process that involves a lot of financial backing and actual motivation, and if you can deal with bullies and the like, and it doesn't feel like a very informative experience aside from giving you theoretical models. I'm not saying I didn't like a lot of the subject materials I was being taught in my school. I'm just saying that to learn them through a very tedious process that can oftentimes be very humiliating. Like, for instance, when you have two different mentors, you have a mentor who you really like, and then you have a mentor who is downright incorrigible. They both teach the exact same subject matter, and the experience is likely to be very equal. But do you really want to waste time going with the incorrigible mentor rather than the mentor you actually love to be around? Like that's what I mean. You don't necessarily need school to understand a lot of the subject material and the like, but no, like people have to make you go through all of that because that's just part of the financial backing system, and you need school to actually have some kind of status in society, basically. But we just do it all wrong, and it's just another process in the way of actual development of lifestyles. And that is just what I mean when I say that money is what makes the world go around. Money is what makes the world go around with schooling, your education system, your family life, your social life. And it doesn't help that we have to deal with all these other systems that feel on par with that of bureaucratic red tape, like with taxes or with having to contact these corporations just to talk money, this and that. And then we have like housing costs and the like. We pretty much have no opportunity to actually realize our dreams because your dreams are only as strong as the money that you have right now. Because again, money makes the world go around, and it's very, very unfortunate. But that is unfortunately what contributes to the likes of rich and poor classes and differences between socioeconomic status. And ironically, that's the very thing that drives the financial system that we favor in a lot of parts of the world. Without these differences in classes between rich and poor, everyone would be earning the same amount. A waiter would be earning the same amount as a doctor, and because everyone is earning the same amount, there would be no motivation to actually do well in your job at all. And that is unfortunately one of the main processes that contributes to our education system being very flawed, and that the only reason our education system exists is to make a name for ourselves, and that's really it, when we could easily pick up these skills somewhere else. But as my dad said, if you want to continue your education, then therefore education has a lot of value. But again, it's all under the powers of biased individuals, because how many times have you gone to a PhD program and you feel you've been very committed to it, but the university doesn't believe so, so therefore they just reject you? I mean, I've gone through that process many, many times at this point, and all for the purpose of just continuing my education to actually get a higher status, so therefore I'll be accepted into more jobs. When actually having the skill set before the job is very different to how you apply those skills in the main job and how the job is set up. There's always going to be these moments where what you're expecting from the job is very different to how the job actually presents itself when you're actually there. And unfortunately, it feels like our whole system of recruiting people is based upon their own beliefs before they enter the job rather than how the job actually proceeds when you're in there. For instance, I have to go to a lot of meetings and the like when all I want to do is just handle the task at hand and then just not deal with any more unnecessary distractions, So unfortunately, that is what I was expecting previously, but that was not the case. I'm having to go to a bunch of pointless meetings and the like just to talk crap, and that's basically it. And then I can actually get to the task at hand, but then they have to introduce all these other systems in place that just make doing the task at hand even harder. Not really harder though, just more tedious. There's a big difference between something that's hard and something that's actually tedious. I mean, what I've talked so far about gaming, for instance, and the very difference between a difficult experience and a poorly designed experience, that can easily be applied to the real world. And it's just another great example of systems in our society that make it very hard to do anything right. And sadly, that is all applied to the gaming industry, which I'm going to get back to my main tangent on, even though it seems like frame rate and the like should be a big priority in developers' minds because of the way we've set up our financial system and the like. We've made it where releasing a broken product presents with less financial consequences than actually taking the time and patience to deliver a functional product. And this whole irony right here can easily be applied to a lot of the other points I just talked about with our schooling and financial system, and why living in this world is made harder due to the fact that we are a scummy society. And again, that was a poor choice of words. Not living harder, living in a more tedious fashion, basically. And that is probably why Warner Brothers had so much trouble actually devoting a lot more time to the things that matter than Batman Arkham Origins, like for instance with frame rate, because the higher-ups just rushed them out the gate pretty much, because they had to deliver this product at a certain release date so that they could actually get their money's worth from the stockholders and not from their consumers. So that is precisely why Batman Arkham Origins has frame rate issues, because the business model dictates the flow of gameplay rather than the actual morally sound argument to this whole idea of releasing a functional game. And that is really all I have to say about this tangent. I know it sounded like I just rambled on, but there's definitely a lot of logic to the ironies that I've just discussed so far, and it's just doing it through this fashion of commentary, just pulling it out of nowhere, given that I had to talk about something not related to the gameplay and just go on some kind of tangent, given that the gameplay for Riddler's side mission doesn't really present with a lot to talk about. Like, doing it through this format is pretty tough, and plus I have to be in the right emotional state. So I don't think I was in the right emotional state, so I apologize if it came across as rambling, but there is definitely some sound logic to what I am saying, and why it is such a huge irony in our society today. And I think I talked about this a bit when I was talking about Batman's moral code and like his one-dimensional view on crime fighting, and that the actual fundamental instability within our society creates more criminals, and I don't think he targets those kind of avenues. So hey, at least there was some relevance I could actually give to Batman and to what I was saying previously, so I'm glad for that. But we have this Riddler Square puzzle, which is the final puzzle of the game. I mean, minus the Riddler challenges, of course, but like, this is the final room of the game specific to Riddler. And the first and second phases of this puzzle I do fine, but the third phase, I didn't really pick the best solution. I kind of took a longer route when there was a very easy route I could have picked, but I didn't notice it immediately. So that sucks for me, but what can you do? I mean, this puzzle's not that hard. It's just a matter of deducing, the logical solution, and that's pretty much it. But I'm just going to go on a different tangent, and I want to talk a bit about an idea I had for detective vision for the Arkham games. So obviously in Batman Arkham Asylum, there was never any kind of counter to detective vision. There was no kind of jamming mechanic introduced with detective vision at all. Detective vision was very powerful in Batman Arkham Asylum. And then in City, Origins, and Night, they introduced jammers, which disable your detective vision, and you can't see anyone, and you can only see that caution symbol over the guy that has the jammer, and so you get rid of him, and then your detective vision is back to normal. And then in Batman Arkham Knight, they introduced the optic deflection armor enemies, where you can't see them at all in detective vision, and the only way they're going to show up in detective vision is if you use the disruptor when you have the upgrade for it to disable the optic deflection armor. And this was not a fully realized mechanic though, because you only ever encounter optic deflection armor enemies in like 3 Predator encounters in the main story, and also in the challenge maps, I believe. And the only 3 places where you see them in the main story are in Two-Face's side mission, Mr. Freeze's side mission, and also the Arkham Knight's boss fight when he's using the sniper rifle. So that's what I mean when I say it's not a fully realized mechanic if they're only restricting it to like 3 encounters, and there's how many encounters in the game? A lot. So it's a pretty negligible design. Well, I had an idea where what if there wasn't a whole mechanic to actually disable detective vision, but you were in a room where there are skeletons? Because, like skeletons that are not part of a living organism still show up in detective vision because detective vision is designed to detect carbon-based life forms. And of course, like bones are made out of carbon, and that's why we don't see the shark in Penguin's museum because shark bones are largely composed of cartilage and they don't show up in any kind of carbon-based scanner. So I was thinking, why not have a kind of boss fight where an enemy of some sort was hiding among these skeletons, and then you had no way of using your detective vision in a way that was actually useful. You had to use your eyes, or maybe there could have been some other mechanic tied to the detective vision. And I know you have the heartbeat monitor as well with detective vision. So that would completely destroy what I'm suggesting right now. But what if the heartbeat monitor didn't work? Or maybe there was some way to simulate a heartbeat effect on the skeletons as well, and like you're searching among the skeletons to find this guy that you're looking for. Maybe a hostage, for instance. You'd be looking for a hostage, or you'd be looking for someone playing a trick on you as part of their boss fight. I mean, I'm not talking about a boss fight very similar to Beneviento's format, because I know a lot of people don't like Beneviento's gimmick fight in Resident Evil Village, but compared to the other shit fights apparent in Resident Evil Village, Beneviento's a lot better, even if it doesn't offer a lot of replayability. And I know a lot of people get dull when just going through that boss fight with Beneviento. But, there could have been something a lot more engaging, like a more engaging form to Beneviento's boss fight in Batman Arkham Knight, where you were looking among these skeletons in detective vision, and you were in detective vision for whatever reason, and you had to find either this hostage or this villain among the skeletons. And it would have been an interesting twist on the whole idea of making detective vision useless, because you're not directly affecting detective vision, you're making detective vision useless by making it too useful. That's what I mean. So that would have been an interesting way to spin things up a bit. I don't know when the thought occurred to me, but I guess in Arkham Asylum, or maybe in a lot of the Predator encounters in the Arkham games where I'm doing these cheesy exploits that just cause enemies to fall down ladders, and there's just a stack of bodies on the ground, and I'm seeing that cluster of skeletons in detective vision. Maybe that's what gave me the whole idea for this. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this whole idea of a detective mode boss fight, of using detective vision in a way that was very useless, but at the same time it had some form of functionality during the fight that was crucial to actually getting it done. I think that would have been an interesting kind of fight, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a gimmick fight, because like the Arkham games are a little bit better when they're not relying upon gimmick fights, although in certain games like Arkham Asylum, I really wish a lot of the fights were just gimmick fights, and Arkham Knight has a lot of gimmick fights, but it makes sense given the context and in the timeline of where Arkham Knight takes place, where a lot of the villains are kind of inactive, and like Batman's mastered so much that he can easily clobber villains in a straight up fight, but in a gimmick fight it'd be a little different. Like that would be an interesting place to introduce this whole kind of idea of a detective mode mechanic actually serving a purpose in a boss fight, but at the same time a hindrance, because you can't properly see which one is alive and which one is fake among the skeletons. Like that could have been a very interesting way to spin things up. So that's all I have to say about that, and I think it's a very interesting idea. But we now have Riddler, so this isn't so much of a boss fight, it's more so you're taking on Riddler's bots, and then eventually what will happen is he'll drop a shield, and then you just pummel him, but not for this fight. This is the official encounter where we get to pummel on Riddler a bit once you've collected all 243 Riddler trophies and done all his challenges, but of course this is New Game Plus, and I've already done all this. I mean, you've already done all this anyway in the original New Game, so you don't have to put up with that. But these fights in particular were very obnoxious because the amount of times Batman or Catwoman would prioritize the wrong guy. And I know that Riddler is transforming these guys into the opposite form so that you're forced to switch characters. But even then, when you're aiming the analog stick in a certain direction, and I'm assuming the game uses a conical form of recognition to decide which enemy your character should prioritize. Like, even when you are using this kind of format, it should always prioritize a guy that they can actually attack, not a guy that you'll just take damage from if you accidentally hit them. And it's not even in your hands at that point. It's the game's prioritization system that is getting in the way of actual functional gameplay. And it's just, I noticed it a lot more with this fight compared to other fights in the Arkham games. So did you see that just then? That was another issue where the takedown wouldn't register. I pressed the button, Batman was just standing around doing nothing for no reason. You even saw the gold multiplier go to gray. Why did he not do the takedown? That's the second time that happened, and it was also happening in a couple of bloopers later on. But one thing I find very strange about the Riddler side mission is it almost gives the impression that this was supposed to be the final mission that you do in the entire game before you activate the Nightfall protocol. Because two things don't make any sense. The first thing is that Kaplan knows who Batman is. So she actually knows Batman's identity as Bruce Wayne somehow, and it's just revealed out of nowhere. There is no evidence of this at all in the previous levels when Batman and Kaplan were together. So how does she know who Batman's secret identity is? And the only possible way that could be true, that she would actually know that, is if Batman had actually revealed his identity to the world at the end of Arkham Knight, and she heard it. And that's why this is happening. The second thing is that at the end of this side mission, for whatever reason, Batman says that Gotham needs something worse, something even greater than himself, a legend that can only rise from the ashes of the Batman. Just the placement of that, it doesn't make any sense if it occurred before his identity is revealed to the world. It would only make sense for him to say that if his identity was revealed before he actually did the side mission for Riddler. But I guess it also presents an interesting idea as well. Remember how I mentioned Godzilla Mendoza's video where he was talking about Arkham Knight's horrendous storytelling? And one of the points that he brought up was how different Batman seems to be when he's captured by Scarecrow, how it doesn't seem like Batman, and that the game just forcefully made him an idiot just to end the series right then and there. Well, what if the whole event where he's talking with Catwoman at the end of Riddler's side mission, and he says that Gotham needs something more than what he can provide right now, what if that was an indication that he was actually going to give up his identity to the world somehow? Like, eventually, like, even if the whole thing with Scarecrow didn't happen, what if in some cases he was going to fake his own death or actually get his identity revealed to the world? Like, something like that, but to actually build off the idea that a legend can only rise from the ashes of the Batman, like he was trying to terminate his own identity as Batman in order for another legend to rise. I mean, if you understand what I mean, then you can probably understand the point of view that it probably makes sense for this whole Riddler side mission to take place before the events of Scarecrow capturing Batman and taking him to Arkham Asylum. The only problem with this point of view is that it's not represented properly in the story, because Batman doesn't actually give any information to his allies on how to be a better hero than what he was, and there's never any kind of moment where Batman is actually looking back at his life as the Dark Knight and saying that he could have done better, and he still feels like the same character that we've been playing as since the beginning of the game. So that's the one thing you can say that just counters this point of view that I am discussing right now, and why it would therefore make no sense for Riddler's side mission to occur before the events that transpire at Arkham Asylum. So that was just the two things I found very odd about Riddler's side mission, how it almost seems like the developers really want you to play this mission after the main story. I mean, with the way the Riddler challenges are set out, where you can only do all of the Riddler's challenges after you beat the Arkham Knight, and that's already occurring at a very late point in the game, so it just makes sense to transition from the Arkham Knight's boss fight to the final part where you go to Arkham Asylum rather than doing the side missions, because that just feels better pacing-wise. Like, that's really what the developers seem to convey with this side mission, that it's best to do the side mission after the main story, given the way they've set out the Riddler challenges, and given the dialogue that is just mentioned from Batman and also with Selina. And I don't understand why they would do this. Why would they try to make this side mission feel like the last boss of the game? And I'm not alone in this department. There are a lot of people out there that really feel like Rocksteady wanted this to be the final encounter of the game if the Riddler challenges are laid out as such, and Batman and Kaplan are saying the things that they're saying that are only possible if Batman's identity was actually revealed before actually finishing this side mission. So the fact that so many people feel the same way really shows that Rocksteady messed up a lot with the story by the end of Batman Arkham Knight, and there were already some inconsistent moments previously at the beginning of the game, and also with the middle of the game. The ending portion of Batman Arkham Knight is the one that really presents with a lot of confusion with the way Rocksteady laid out the pacing of these encounters. So I just thought I'd bring that up, but we're about to finish Riddler in a moment. And that looked like a simple encounter, but believe me guys, the amount of times I ended up getting screwed by the game is a lot, and you'll see it in the blooper section, and I don't think that's the full amount I actually encounter when it comes to errors. But here's this dialogue that Batman says that is only possible to interpret from the right context if you did the Riddler side mission last, rather than doing it before the main story, which really doesn't make any sense. But that first blooper, Batman did the wrong evade, he did the normal evade rather than the free flow evade, and then right there, why did I take damage? I took a little bit of damage from nothing. What was that about? And then we have this blooper right here where Batman prioritizes the wrong guy. Why did he prioritize the red guy and not the blue guy directly next to him? They should have been in the same sector of prioritization, so therefore Batman should have prioritized the blue guy. And then the same problem occurred with Kaplan just then. And right there, Batman didn't do the takedown animation for whatever reason, because the game decided to fuck me and he prioritized the wrong guy. Wow, great design. And what do we have right here? Batman prioritizes the wrong guy for whatever reason. Look, why? Why did he prioritize the wrong guy? That doesn't make any sense. Like, did Rocksteady not properly QA test this boss fight to ensure that this whole misprioritization system wasn't occurring? Because they clearly didn't, because this happens more times to me in this boss fight than in anywhere else in the Arkham games, and it is really frustrating. But that is the end of this video. Stay tuned for the future videos. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.